Has a handball, still a chance, is it a goal? It is! He's got the big goal! He's got the premiership! There's Milo crossover, step back, wide open, and it's good! Not much help. Oh, he doesn't need any help! How about that?
This is the world of sport.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the World of Sport podcast. I'm Jimmy and with me as always is Mitch, and we're brought to you by the good people down at Pizza Strata and Bar in North Dandenong. They make unbelievable authentic Italian pizza, so go on down there, tell them we sent you and they'll take care of you. Mitch, what a week of sport it's been. Look, as Aussies we're obviously shattered by Ben Stokes and his, it's not even once in a generation, it's just once in a cricket lifetime innings. Like, some of the greats have just been astounded by what he did. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the AFL and all the teams that didn't make the finals and what they can do to make the finals next season, the good and the bad of the season that's just passed. And we'll just generally give you a rundown of what we saw from each of those clubs and how their future looks. We'll also talk about the F1. Leclerc won on a really somber day at Spa in the Belgian Grand Prix, and I really hit home as a sports, not only a sports fan but a sports player, that life is so precious and it could really happen to any of us. From a car that's going 300 k's an hour to playing soccer or tennis or anything. You never know when your time's up. So it's a really difficult situation, and just makes you appreciate the sport that you get to play on the weekend or get to watch. We'll also talk about the US Open with Nelly, and also some big news in the MLB. We'll also sort of preview each division in the NFL and see who we think's who's gonna take home the chocolates and who might end up winning in the whole thing, the Super Bowl. So that'll be exciting. And we'll finish with Pete and talk about all things football. We'll probably get distracted again and talk for far too long, but hey ho, we love sport. What are you going to do about it? We love it, and we hope you love it too. We'll start with the F1, and an unfortunate weekend for the F1 family, with Antoine Hubert unfortunately dying in an F2 race. He was a rising star. He just won the GP3 in 2018, and it's a tough one, especially for sport lovers. I'll admit, when I watched the tributes to Hubert and sort of the video that the F1 community made, I almost had a tear in my eyes, because it's just, particularly as someone who plays sport myself, you just obviously don't understand the toll of death in this instance, but you understand the risks you take playing and like the emotional impact sport has on people. And to have all the races go out, and the F1 races go out and continue to race at the Belgium Grand Prix despite the news is you don't know how they do it mentally. But first of all, before we get into the race, we just want to pass on our condolences to the Hubert family and the wider F1 community, because he was a much-loved figure and a rising star. But Mitch, the eventual race winner went to Leclerc, who was actually a close friend of Hubert, and they grew up together. They were roughly the same age, and it's kind of a fitting end to a pretty stinky weekend for the F1 that Leclerc ends up getting his first F1 title amidst all the drama of a close friend of his dying.
Yeah, it puts a nice end to a really sad story in the NFL, in the F1. Sorry, but you see, he dedicates the win to him, and they all observed a moment of silence before the race. So you just see that it's a lot more of a brotherhood than people maybe from the outside looking in tend to believe, and they're all um, in this sort of together. They see each other as rivals rather than enemies, and yeah, it's good to see the sportsmanship come through in there. But yeah, very sad weekend for the F1.
Yeah, in particular, our very own Ricardo he was brought to tears, and after the race, he said, "I'm glad today's over. I'm glad the race is over." And it must have been so difficult excuse me, for all of them to just go out there and race, given the dangers of their sport on full display over the weekend. And I honestly don't know how they did it. And I suppose hats off to them for going out there and racing. But even Ricardo himself said, you question, is it really worth it? Whether it's worth to race or not. And that's something I think all sports people ask themselves, but in particular F1, where a mistake at 300 odd k's an hour is fatal, as this weekend proved. And sort of move on to the race now. And as we said, Leclerc ended up winning in sort of for lack of a better term, a fairy tale finish for him. More of a fitting finish for the events of the weekend. But Ferrari, they've done really well for themselves. Their engine development has probably surpassed Mercedes. I think I read somewhere that they've got 20 more horsepower than Mercedes, and better aerodynamics than Mercedes, and that really proved itself on a fast track. And they finished 8 tenths in front of Lewis Hamilton. Leclerc finished 8 tenths in front of Lewis Hamilton in qualifying. So the Ferrari is just starting to overtake the Mercedes in terms of the actual speed of the car. The only difference is probably taking care of the tires, and as we saw in the race, Hamilton was hot on the tail of Leclerc at the end of the race, and if not for the checkered flag, I think Hamilton probably needed one more lap to take the dub from Leclerc. I think Leclerc's teammate Vettel did really well to hold up Hamilton, and probably end up gifting his teammate the checkered flag because of that. So I think Leclerc will probably owe Vettel a beer after the game or something. I mean, Ferrari tried everything. They tried to bluff Mercedes with an early pit stop from Vettel. But yeah, the big talking point is not taking care of tires with Ferrari, and we'll see what happens at Monza. You'd think Leclerc is probably the favourite again. It's another fast track, but we'll see if Ferrari learn from their mistakes and take care of their tires. The Englishman Norris was a, a bit of a laughing point. I mean, you feel for the guy, but his power failed with a lap to go in probably the best race of his career in fifth place. So you got to feel for him, but it's kind of funny and in a really sort of sadistic way. But yeah, and probably the other big mention of the race is Verstappen crashing out again because he was too aggressive again. So, when will Ferrari learn to take care of their tires, and when will Verstappen learn not to drive like an idiot and maybe have a bit of race awareness, and not go flat out into a corner that has no space for him? So we'll see about that. But yeah, the big talking point, or the big event of the weekend, was the unfortunate passing of Antoine Hubert. So yeah, kind of overshadows all analysis of the F1, or all talk of the F1. And yeah, we just wish all the F1 family and the Hubert family our condolences, and all the all the best, I guess, for the future. Um, we'll move on now, Mitch, from one heartache to a different heartache, I guess. And the Ashes took an interesting turn. Last time we talked, it was the middle of the fourth day, which ended up being the
Yep.
final day, I believe. And we were sitting recording our podcast, and we sort of got the feeling that England would comfortably get over the line for Australia to take a stranglehold of the game, for then Ben Stokes to wriggle his way out and do the impossible.
Yeah, he really proved me wrong. I said I didn't think he was cut out to be a test batsman, but he really proved me wrong. Soaked up the pressure early and then, yeah, made us pay. And as an Australian, I'd rather almost anyone else on the English team hit the winning runs apart from Ben Stokes. The combination of New Zealand and English that just kills you.
Yeah, I actually stayed up and watched the entire, whatever you want to call it, the world class innings, the Australian collapse, whatever you want to call it. I stayed up and watched the carnage unfold, and I thought to myself, "Ah, look, I'll just stay up for a little bit longer. England are starting to lose a couple wickets. Don't know if it'll last that much longer. The ninth wicket has happened. I'll stay up and watch Australia retain the Ashes, and I'll go to bed, snuggle up, and smile to myself that we beat the Poms." And I couldn't believe what was unfolding in front of me. And look, most England, if any English people or fans are listening to our podcast, I mean, you guys might want to record our voices for this segment, and put it on repeat and just listen to the agony and despair in like two Australians coming to terms with what unfolded. It was really the great escape from England and keeps an unbelievable Ashes alive.
Yeah, and definitely one of the more exciting test matches I can remember watching, and I think probably one of the more exciting from a pure cricket standpoint of of my lifetime. But yeah, you hate as an Australian fan, you hate seeing that, and you hate seeing Stokes dropped with only a handful of runs left. So, oh well, it makes the rest of the series a lot more interesting. I mean, England's got to win them all from here, and if Australia can win one, then we retain the Ashes. That's a simple equation.
It's very true. In addition to the drop catch, just quickly, there was also the missed run out from Nathan Lyon, and also the missed plum LBW from Joel Wilson. So
Mm.
in an inconsistent Ashes, at least one thing is consistent, and that's Joel Wilson's umpiring. So we'll have to give that one to him. Uh,
Yep, 3 votes.
Three votes, Joel Wilson. Love it. Yeah, I couldn't believe the last sort of 2 overs that I just witnessed, from, as you said, the drop catch to the missed LBW to Stokes spanking the winning runs. I just couldn't believe what was happening in front of me, and just was punching the pillow, just in absolute rage at how the Australians let that one go. Yeah.
Well, it was disappointing, but you think next test we get Steve Smith back, and hopefully he shores up the team a bit, and they're really hurting after that loss, and so they come out with a vengeance.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see how Australia respond. Archer came out and said that the ball's in England's court now for the Ashes. The momentum is definitely with England, but in saying that, momentum doesn't cover up batting flaws and their batting lineup, or the fact that they can't get Steve Smith out. So, momentum only lasts for maybe the first hour or two of Test match cricket. And I think that's why I love Test match cricket above all else, because the drama of it, the ebbs and flows, and the momentum swings are just everything. If if I think the next test is in Manchester, if Australia come out on the first day bowling and take a bunch of wickets, momentum for England is gone, and it's just back to the drawing board, back to being in the corner. And if Australia come out and make a bunch of runs, same thing. And if England come out and do what I just said to Australia, then the Ashes is right back on, and this will be the most fascinating fourth test of an Ashes, at least in my short time on this earth.
Yeah, yeah. I can't remember the last time the fourth test has been really hotly contested and as interesting as this one is. So it's exciting. It's good for the game, I reckon.
Just quickly, who does Steve Smith come in for?
Ideally, I'd like to see him come in for Kawaja, but I mean, I can't even begin to predict what the selectors will do. So hopefully, Kawaja. I'd like to see Harris given a bit more of a chance. He looked pretty good against Derbyshire, so I can keep him in the side and just bring Steve Smith in for Kawaja.
Yeah, I think Harris is very important to Warner's success, which is a bit of a weird thing to say, but when Warner was the second highest run scorer in the Ashes a couple of years back with Chris Rogers at the other end, Chris Rogers scored very quickly and took the pressure off Warner from being, his what he's renowned for, being devastating. So it allowed him to take his time, get his eye in, and then make up for lost balls 20 or 30 balls later and really pick up the scoring rate. So I think Harris is really important to Warner's success in this test match by taking a bit of the scoring pressure off him. And I also wanted to see whether you thought Starkey would get a run.
I mean, he can't really do much more than he has been in terms of pressing his name for selection. But um, I mean, I don't think he can take out Cummins or Hazelwood, and Pattinson's been playing really well as well. So maybe he comes in for Pattinson if you want to manage his workload. But yeah, I mean, it's a good problem for the Australians to have, keeping arguably one of the best pace bowlers in the world on the sidelines running the drinks. But I think unless they're managing Pattinson, then I don't see Stark coming in.
I think it'd be definitely a knee-jerk reaction to bring Stark in. A lot of people said, "Oh, if we had Stark, the English wouldn't have been able to chase down our score, in particular with 70 runs when Leach came in." But I think as cricket fans, not Australian cricket fans, as cricket fans, you have to appreciate Ben Stokes' innings for what it was, and it's historic. It's once in a cricketing generation, maybe even longer. There's been so many people come out and have said it's just the most unbelievable innings that they've ever watched, and those people have witnessed a lot of innings in their time. So for so many people to come out and just say how ridiculous it was just speaks volumes to just what an innings it was. And I think for Australia to make such knee-jerk reactions because of Ben Stokes's innings would kind of be counterproductive. I think just stick to the plan. It's been working. And if a freak thing innings like that happens again, then you just got to take your hat off to whoever performs.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think they'll be taking too much negativity away from that. The Australians, I think they played well for the most part. I mean, Stokes' performance in the second innings makes everyone forget about England's first innings, which was some of the worst cricket I've ever seen. So um, I think the Australians have a lot of positives to take away, but also stuff that they can work on and carry into um, the next test in a couple of days' time.
100% agree. I think the first session of the fourth test will tell us a lot about how the Ashes will go. So it's important for both teams to put the third test behind them, especially the English. They can't just assume that all their problems are going to be fixed because of one freak innings from Ben Stokes. So I think England still have just as many questions to answer as they did before the innings. They just, fortunately for them, they're at 1-1. But moving on, that's enough for the Ashes. We'll move on to the AFL. And the bye week is behind us, Mitch. So a week of no more footy is behind us, at least till
Thankfully.
September, late September, early October. So in light of the fact that there's no footy, we thought we would go through the teams that didn't make the finals and just quickly analyze, quickly talk about the good, the bad, and what they need to do for next season for each team. And yeah, we'll start with you, Mitch, with Gold Coast.
Yeah, thought let's start at the bottom. Gold Coast. So the good, I really liked their first month of footy. They came out, they played really competitive footy, won 3 of their first 4 games, and yeah, it looked really competitive. But after that, they just capitulated, and maybe that talks to the age and the maturity of their team. But I really liked their first month of footy, and that was, unfortunately for them, that was the high point, and it was all downhill from there. And I'd say so. The bad was Jack Martin, and I think it's not him in particular, but what he stands for. They can't hold their players. Any talent that they have wants to leave. So I think Jack Martin is a symptom of the disease that Gold Coast can't hold on to their good players. And him wanting to be traded to Carlton, I think, speaks volumes for where Gold Coast is at the moment. I mean, Carlton, don't get me wrong, they're up and coming, but I mean, for the last 5, 6, 7 years, Carlton's been poor, and so for him to want to be traded away from the Gold Coast to go to somewhere that has in the last handful of years not been a very good team, it does not say a lot about your footy club. So what I think they need, and this sort of ties in, what I think they need to do for next season to get better is they really need to develop their own brand and their own style of footy. When you watch a Gold Coast game, they don't have a consistent brand of footy that you can point to and say, this is what we're doing, this is the structures we have, this is our style of footy. If you want to get on board, there's a clear vision. And so players know that, and they know that there's no real systems in place, and no real brand that they can identify with, and that's why they can't attract players. So I think Stewie Jew needs to spend the off season really developing a brand and getting all the players on board.
Gold Coast is an interesting phenomena, and it'll definitely be very interesting to see what they do. I did hear an interesting there was potential that Northern Territory could be given priority to the Gold Coast. Do you think that'll have any impact?
It's hard to say. I think a lot of the players from the Northern Territory, the Indigenous players, are the more like your Surioli and Sydney Stack, Eddie Betts, these players that have miraculous impact on the game with only a handful of possessions. But I think Gold Coast needs more consistent, like grunt workers, like your Lockie Neals, your Fifes, your Tom Mitchells, all these players that just get the ball and do all the hard work rather than kick 5 goals from 7 touches.
And just quickly, do you think getting a priority pick will have any impact on Gold Coast success in the near future?
No, I think whoever that priority pick should just be traded away. If they get a priority pick, all the other clubs will be in massive outcry. But I think Gold Coast will, if they get a priority pick, will want to trade it away for a bit more maturity and a bit more experience. They don't need more 17-year-olds. They need 27-year-olds.
Completely agreed. And in second last place, with the biggest surprise of the season, was Melbourne. Probably the biggest disappointment of the season. I know I was listening to SEN, which is a radio station here in Victoria. If you didn't know, listeners, and they asked, "Is Adelaide the biggest disappointment of 2019?" And everyone was saying yes. And has everyone already forgotten about how abysmal Melbourne season was from prelim to second last? So they're in a world of strife. I mean, their upside was that they were ranked in the top 5 for contested possession and inside 50s. Prior to the season, Champion Data had them as the best list in the comp. Their big recruits, May and Lever, didn't have a huge impact, which means that they have scope to get even better with when those two sort of have a full preseason and stop drinking when they're injured, which is a bit of a dig at May. So their upside is massive. They got Darren Burgess coming in for their high performance manager. But what went wrong? I don't think many people know where Melbourne went wrong. Their forward line looked abysmal, looked in disarray. For the amount of forward entries they were getting absolutely nothing from it. You got to wonder what impact losing Hogan had on them. Tom McDonald and Sam Wiedemann seem to be nothing like what they showed the season prior. So maybe getting a Josh Jenkins could help. And in saying that their little recruits did nothing, so they had a big scope for next season, that is also a massive negative that a lot of people did not step up to the plate. May, Lever, Wiedemann, McDonald, a lot of big names from the season prior just did nothing. A lot of injuries, Kolajasny, Garlett, McDonald, May, round 21. What they can do next season, they have a lot of bulls on the inside. Maybe a Brad Hill or a Langdon could help them on the outside, and maybe Josh Jenkins to partner with Tom McDonald and Sam Wiedemann.
Yeah. So just to sort of take that a step further, do you think that they cashed in on Wiedemann and McDonald a bit early and got rid of Hogan potentially a bit prematurely?
Personally, I think 100%. I think Hogan took the best defender from each team, and Tom McDonald and Wiedemann played on, not the number one defender, and they were able to bully their way to success, kind of. So without someone else taking the number one defender, one of those two now takes the number one defender, and the other one takes the number two defender. And just by sheer logic, they're not going to be as impactful because the quality of defender opposite them is much better.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think maybe if you get a full preseason under May and Lever and try and manage them and keep them injury free, could be a different story again next year. But we'll have to wait and see. I guess moving on to Carlton, the best. Well, it's hard to go past one of the best players in the competition, Paddy Cripps. He just really carried a big load in the midfield, as he has for the last couple of years. Won the Coaches Association MVP. Probably a real chance for the Brownlow, which is surprising from a team with so few wins. But yeah, by far the best part of this team, which is a really exciting young team, I think, finally.
Yeah. In addition to Sam Walsh getting the Rookie of the Year.
Yeah. So and Patrick Cripps isn't old either by any stretch of the imagination. So a lot of upside if you're a Blues supporter. But for me, the worst was the beginning of the year, the first 10 or 11 games under Brendan Bolton. And then he got the sack. But watching them at the beginning of the season and watching them at the end, I don't know how many coaching changes were made between the first half and the second half of the season. So maybe it speaks more to their hunger and desire at the beginning of the season than it does to the coaching quality of Bolton or Teague. But very poor start to the season. But second half they were looking good, exciting footy. So hopefully they can take that into the next season. And I think the number one thing for them to concentrate on over the off season to take into the 2020 season is just managing players with injuries. We've seen Doherty's missed the last 2 seasons, probably their best player. Maybe not anymore with Cripps, but definitely when he got injured, he was their best player. Like to see him back on the track next year. Charlie Curnow has played next to no footy this year, so just concentrating on getting these key players right, and all of a sudden they become a real contender for finals footy.
Do you think they'll make the leap to finals footy? A lot of pundits have Carlton in the 8 next season, but what do you think?
Unless they do some recruiting in the off season, no. I think not next year, but probably the year after. I'd see them making a push for finals, but they would have to get, I think, a bit more maturity into their list, and then they're probably a contender. But there's still a lot of teams that are in the 8 currently that I don't see dropping out next year. So there's not a lot of spots.
I completely agree. When people ask, will they be in the 8 next season, they often forget to ask, well, who's going to make way for them? And I don't see any of those teams dropping off to outside the 8 that drastically. And I see, the likes of Hawthorn and Port, the fringe finals candidates getting better as well. So, Carlton have to bridge that gap to the 8, but also bridge that gap to the teams in front of them to make the 8. So moving on to Sydney, a list very much in transition. Dare we say rebuild? The Swans lost, get a load of this, 1,048 games when McVeigh, Jack, Grundy, and Smith retired.
Wow.
So that is a lot of experience, but also a lot of cap space. So let's not forget about that. The downside for their season, obviously not making finals. A lot of their experienced players are retiring or getting to the point where they're about to retire. Franklin had a lot of soft tissue injuries, so there's a lot of when Franklin's up and about, the Swans are up and about. So I think Franklin having injuries did a lot of hurt for the Swans this season, and I think he's very important to their success next season. The good was that a lot of youngsters stepped up or emerged from largely their academy. They probably have the best academy in the country. So you have the likes of Florent, Blakey, McCartan, Rowbottom, Mills, Heaney, Papley, Rampy. I mean, they're all genuine young guns in their own right. So I think Sydney have a good core of youngsters coming through. It'll just take a bit of time to get there. So we'll see. They have a bit of a lack of depth in the tools department. There's talk Danaher might come, but they have a lot of cap space. They have a lot of youngsters there, so they have a lot of freedom in the off season to sort of forge their own path.
Yeah, I guess just on the Buddy Franklin point, do you see him going around again next year? And does he play more footy than he did this year? The same amount of footy? What do you see if he plays next year? What do you see his season looking like?
I think he'll definitely play the next couple seasons, barring some horrific injury. I honestly couldn't tell you. I think I couldn't tell you how much he'll play. I think that really comes down to his own personal fitness and how well the medical team does in sort of maintaining his aging body. But I mean, for the AFL's sake, I hope he has as close to a full season next season as possible, because the AFL's better for having Buddy in it.
Yeah, it definitely brings that showtime factor and gets people through the gates, and that's what they love, and we love watching it. I guess moving on to St Kilda, a bit of a middle of the road team. Um, Hard to make anything of them this year, I think, which maybe is a bit harsh words, but the best, I think, came in round 18 when they beat the Bulldogs by 4.5 goals. The Bulldogs, that was when they were really starting to mount their huge charge for finals, and for St Kilda to beat a team like that at that stage in the season, yeah, it was a really good win. So I think it says a lot about their potential, but yeah, they just couldn't string any other big scalps together throughout the season. I think the worst isn't so much St Kilda's fault, but I'd say the low point is what's happening with Paddy McCartan. It's just a really sad story for a guy with such a great talent whose body has let him down and he hasn't been able to have a good crack at it. So all the best to Paddy McCartan. Hopefully he can get over these concussion problems and yeah, really get a fair crack at some decent time on the ground on the park with hopefully a better St Kilda side than when he was previously playing. And I think for next year, I think personally they need to go to the draft. They need to rebuild. There's talk of Jack Stephen wanting to go to Geelong, go home to Geelong, and there's talk of Jake Carlisle being put on the trade table. And I think they've both got, I think, a bit of collateral to be traded for. So use that, get some draft picks in what's meant to be a fairly deep draft. Yeah, use that and rebuild. You've got players like Seb Ross and Jack Billings who are at that perfect 100 or so games that you can start getting in young players and really building a strong team from there. But I don't see any of their older players as really elite, except maybe Jack Stephen. But he's been in and out of the team with mental health issues and obviously, yeah, he might want to go back to Geelong. So I think the best option for them is to go to the draft and do a bit of a rebuild.
I think Jake Carlisle sort of epitomizes St Kilda. They traded pick 5 or 6 for him to Essendon, and they've just, I don't even know how to describe what they got. They just got a player that could have been so much better, was an all Australian or in all Australian form when they got him, and he's just never lived up to his expectation, just looks a shadow of his former self. And I think that's kind of just Carlton as a whole, St Kilda as a whole, just kind of Carlisle's plight and the luck that St Kilda have to get a player who then gets banned and just sort of never really recaptures his form.
Exactly, couldn't agree more.
In saying that, the Bombers picked up Francis and Parrish with those picks from memory, so I think the Bombers were definitely the winner in that trade. Moving on
definitely chocolates.
Yeah. Moving on to Freo. It's hard to really know where to start with Freo. Bit of a weird season. First and foremost, injuries didn't help. Hogan, Stephen Hill, Pearce, who was in All-Australian form at the time he went down, Tabernar, Bennell, despite all the chances or whatever, just couldn't get up with injuries. It really exposed Freo's lack of depth, all their injuries, and the fact that they lost to Gold Coast and Carlton are the reasons why they missed finals, and that can't happen. Sacked their coach, and Brad Hill and Langdon look set to leave. So that's probably a big list of where Freo went wrong. But on the flip side, Walters, Brayshaw, and Fife had wonderful seasons, and you can really build a midfield around those three. Um, and despite Ross Lyon getting sacked and everything aforementioned, Freo still beat GWS, the Dogs, the Lions, the Pies, and the Cats. So they took some big scalps with them, despite missing out on finals. And I think for next season, they first and foremost have to fix their in-house problems, get a coach. Justin Longmuir looks to head that list. He's a Western Australian boy himself, and has apparently done great things at Collingwood. And I think they have to throw the kitchen sink at Tim Kelly and I mean Kelly, Walters, Brayshaw, and Fife, and you sort of start to build you have a midfield that can rival the best of them.
Yeah, definitely. I think on the Ross Lyon point, I think that there's more to the story than people are saying, and I think in the coming months we might find out that there's a lot more to that Ross Lyon story. I mean, he was sacked with 1 week left to go in the season. There's no reason to do that close to the end of the season. I can understand like a Carlton or a North Melbourne sacking the coach halfway through, because if you know, well, this guy's not going to be the guy to coach us next year, then there's no point having him in for so long. But there's no harm having Russ Lyon in for one more game when they weren't going to make finals. So I think there might be a little bit more to that story. But yeah, onto the Tim Kelly point, I think they've got to throw everything they have at getting Tim Kelly, and his addition to that midfield will make them probably one of the strongest, if not the strongest, midfield core in the competition.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, and then coming back to Victoria, North Melbourne, another one of those teams that, yeah, it's a bit hard to get a read on. They've got the spine there, really good spine, but I think the players around them maybe let them down. Big Benny Brown, got a good tall young kid, Nick Larkey, Todd Goldstein, one of the better ruckmen in the competition, and then Robbie Tarrant down back. They had Scott Thompson as well, but as we know, he's retired now. So, yeah, I think their best was beating Collingwood by 44 points in round 15. I mean, one of the grand finalists from the year before, they finished top four, and to beat them by such a big margin, I think that was a huge scalp by them, especially in a time where there was a lot of uncertainty with their head coach. So, yeah, good. And it shows, I think, again, it shows what North Melbourne is capable of at their best. But at their worst, I mean, good transition was round 21 when they kicked 1 goal against Geelong. And the only reason people don't talk more about that is because it was the same week that the Bulldogs kicked 21 straight goals against Essendon. And so I think North Melbourne is very lucky that happened on the same night, because to kick 1 goal in an entire game of footy is just disgraceful. Yeah, I think that's why it's hard to get a read on North Melbourne. They can be very good, but they can also be very bad, and that's why they finish 12th, 13th, 14th. So for next year, I think they've got a lot of plotters in the midfield and they have the grunt, but they need some polish and some speed on the outside. So maybe target a Brad Hill, I think they tried to target a player like that in Polek, and maybe he needs a bit more time to really get into the structures that they have and learn to play under a new coach with new players. But yeah, I think they need a bit more of that class. They've got the Zeeble, Cunningtons, even Higgins is a bit of a tough inside player. Then they need that speed, that quickness, even small forward quickness. They've got the talls, but yeah, they need the small, fast polish on the outside around these big bodies.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see which sort of way North Melbourne slide, and we'll probably get a proper read on I'm really sure, with a full preseason. Um,
Yeah.
we'll look at Adelaide now, and it's probably going to be the quickest review of their season. 3 words: an absolute shambles.
Mm.
A carousel of players getting dropped and then brought back in. I mean, they gave up so much for Gibbs just to not play him. Betts is a genuine match winner, in and out of the side, and Josh Jenkins in and out of the side. Um, I think the hierarchy has something's going on up the top of the football club, and that needs to sort out before anything else can happen on the field. Before real changes will be seen, like the real tangible on field changes will be evident when they fix whatever's going on in the hierarchy. Um, the only real positive I saw was maybe Fogarty. Um,
Mm.
and Riley O'Brien in the ruck. Um, but other than that, I don't know where to start with Adelaide. I don't know where to finish, and I think a lot of their problems are unseen to the normal fan or pundit, and don't know how to review their season other than what could have been.
Yeah, I think ever since that loss to Richmond in the grand final, I think there's been massive internal problems at that club, and especially when it came out their preseason torture camp. I think that club's going to have a lot to answer for. I think, yeah, the administration at that club has got to go. You can't trade 2 first-round picks for Bryce Gibbs and then just keep him in the sandful all year. And Riley O'Brien is in red hot form, and then he just gets dropped. No reason, not managing his minutes, not any injury, just dropped for Sauce Jacobs, who's, let's face it, not playing much more good footy in his career. He's towards the end of his career. Why not invest in this young guy who's playing really good footy and pressing his case? So I think, yeah, they've got to do something about Adelaide. But I mean, there's a lot of players that, like Gibbs, Jenkins, these guys still, Betts even, still have a couple of good years of footy left in them. So some teams are going to snap them up, and Adelaide's going to look like a fool.
Agreed. Agreed 100% on they'll look like a fool in the off season.
Yeah. And I guess ties in nicely the other Adelaide team. So both Adelaide teams missing finals, and I think that's pretty poor. Both teams would have been touted, especially in the first half of the season, would have been touted to be well and truly locked in for finals, but a bit of a capitulation in South Australia, and Port Adelaide ended up missing finals. The good, they have a lot of young talent. The 3 first year players, Rosie, Dersma, and Butters, they looked really good all year. I think this year especially, we've been spoiled by the first year players coming in and having such a big impact. Obviously, Sam Walsh took the rising star, but I think Rosie had a very strong case for that award as well. And Dersma brings a bit of excitement, and Butters is a very, very good player as well. But they also have other young players that are quite good. I mean, Ryan Burton, they got from the Hawks. He's still young. I think he's 23 or 24. Yeah, then there's probably others that I don't know. I think Carl Amon's quite young still as well. So they've got a lot of upside, a lot of promise. But yeah, the worst. You lose to North Melbourne by 86 points in round 22. That is a real embarrassment, especially when your season is still on the line. There's still a final spot up for grabs. That's just an inexcusable loss, especially by that sort of margin. That just talks volumes about your hunger and your desire, and where your headspace is at as a club. I think questions start being asked about Ken Hinkley. But as we've said a couple of times on this podcast, given all of these coaches have been let go and the only people they've found as the new head coaches have all been internal, tells me that there's not a lot of good coaching prospects out there. So he might be safe for another year, but we'll have to wait and see. And I think going into next year, I think they've just got to get another big preseason under these young players. They do have talent in the more experienced players with Boak and Gray and Lysette coming in from West Coast. So they've got the experienced players and they got the young players. So everything's there for them to make finals and do some damage in finals. So maybe just getting another preseason, another year for Lysette to learn to play with new players, and maybe it is a coaching change that they need to make to be a really, really strong finals contender, or maybe it's just between the ears for Port Adelaide. They've always struggled in September and in the back end of the season. There's I think in 2014 or 2015 or something, they were in red hot form until September or until the second half of the season, and they just fell apart. So maybe it's just between the ears.
Yeah, we'll find out. I think Ken Hinckley's definitely in a much better place, and his job is much more secure in inverted commas than Don Pike. So we'll see what happens in Adelaide.
Yeah.
And last of all, in ninth place, your boys, Mitch, the Hawkers, almost is probably the best way to describe it. We're in finals in the last place for finals on Saturday night of the last round, so you couldn't really get much closer. But unfortunately, pipped by the Dogs in the end. Really, I mean, the Hawker season couldn't have got off to a worse start than having Tom Mitchell go down and ruled out for the entire season before, like, even the preseason games had started. So you're already behind the eight ball with a Brownlow medalist and your leading disposal getter going down. Wingard had a slow start, was trying to get up to speed. His fitness just wasn't up to standard. I think that's probably the only way to describe the season. Just a really slow, inconsistent start. With a few of your main players going down, and at the back end, Impey's injury wasn't ideal, and will probably impact next season as well. I think the Hawks have a much larger upside than downside. I mean, they just missed out on finals, so couldn't have been that bad. O'Meara stepped up to the plate. Kelly got through the season relatively unscathed. Despite the plethora of injuries and he had coming to the Hawks, so that'd be a massive plus. The emergence of Mitch Lewis and O'Brien in the forward line is huge for them. Given Ruffy's departure, Warple stepped up to the plate, which is really exciting for Hawks fans to have such a great addition to the midfield. And Sicily also stepped up as well. He may be annoying, but he's a hell of a player. So I think all of those
unlucky to miss out on All Australian, I think.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, there's a lot of players that could probably say that, but Sicily would definitely be up there. But all of those players, just aforementioned, Lewis, O'Brien, Warple, Sicily, they all either emerged or continued their upwards trend. So that's really exciting. The Hawkers also look set to secure Patton. According to Mitch, it's a done deal. So that's exciting to join Mitch Lewis and O'Brien. They'll be, if they can get Patton's body right, and the Hawkers do have a track record of fixing players, and that's a really exciting forward line for the Hawks and really dangerous for other teams. And probably the biggest upside is that you have Alistair Clarkson as the coach. Looking to next season, and as I said, Patton looks all but secure. It'll be interesting to see what Hawthorn do with their picks. Recently, they've traded them off. I think the highest pick that they made was Ryan Burton at pick 19 a couple of years or several years back now. I think that's the highest pick that they've had in recent memory. And it might be wise to invest in a younger backline given Frawley and Stratton are getting a bit older. So I think Hawks are going to make the 8 next season. Probably at the expense of my boys Essendon. Or I think that's who will probably make way for Hawthorn. But yeah, I think a lot of positives for Hawks, and given all the teams we've talked about thus far, I think Hawthorn probably have the most to be happy about heading into the 2020 season.
Yeah, I think there might be some interesting list decisions made at Hawthorn. There's quite a few over 30-year-old players, so interesting to see whether they go around again. I think there's a policy where once you turn 30, you only get 1 year contract at a time. So be interesting to see what happens there, whether players want to go and seek a bit more long-term security. But yeah, I think the season was, as you said, very inconsistent. Losing when we shouldn't, the Hawks shouldn't have lost, and winning when the Hawks shouldn't have won. So, yeah, very up and down season.
I think the highlight though was at the back end once you when the Hawks did find their straps, they beat the Giants and the Eagles fairly comfortably, and both of those teams are firmly entrenched in the top 8 and challenging for top 4 at that point in time. And they really set the blueprint for the likes of the Doggies and the Bombers, who do face those two teams in finals this coming week, to beat them. And as I mentioned, you have Alistair Clarkson at the helm of the Hawks, and I mean that's a big enough plus for any club, let alone a club with the caliber of players and youngsters coming through like the Hawks. So yeah, the most upside of any club outside the 8. Closely followed by, I think, Carlton and Melbourne, and only because Melbourne have a great list and had such a good season last year, they have a big upside. But I quickly want your predictions for the coming finals, Mitch. And on Thursday night, my mob, the Bombers, go up to Perth to play West Coast. What do you think will be the result there?
Yeah, well, we've seen over the past couple of weeks, West Coast has been vulnerable. So they came over here, over to Melbourne, and lost to the Tigers, which you would expect from most teams coming to play the Tigers at the MCG. But then Hawthorn went over there and beat them at home. So I think a lot of people are writing Essendon off, but I think I think it's going to be a lot closer than everyone's sort of suggesting, especially with the Bombers getting some key personnel back. Make for a very interesting match. I think the big key matchup, well, the big thing for the Bombers is how fit can Michael Hurley get between now and the game, because he's going to have a big task on an injured shoulder against the Twin Towers of West Coast. So, yeah, that's the one to watch for mine.
Yeah, I was literally about to say, I think Essendon's chances are definitely on Hurley's shoulders.
Hurley's shoulder.
Yeah, no pun intended. Okay, just a little bit intended. Quickly, prediction for the game?
West Coast by under 3 goals.
I'm going to refrain from giving my prediction. As a Bomber supporter, I can't separate my heart and my head, but on logic, you'd have to go with the West Coast Eagles. Next game is a home game for Collingwood. Oh, sorry, I meant Geelong. Uh, Also, very intended joke there. The Cats, for me, I'm just going to go straight out and give my prediction is Cats will have a comfortable win. They've choked Collingwood every time they've played this season, held them to really low, or even in recent times last season, they've kept Collingwood to really low scores, and I think the Cats just have Collingwood's number. So I'm going to do the Cats above 30.
Okay, and just to make it interesting, I'm going to say Collingwood by 3 goals. The Cats in recent years have been terrible out of a bye week. I think they've lost like something like 7 out of their last 9 or 8 out of their last 10 or something like that after a week off. So they got a track record of not being good after a week off, and I think the Pies getting back to goey adds a huge X factor in their forward line and can go through the midfield. So plus the Cats have looked vulnerable this second half of the season. So I think it'll be an absolute belter of a game. Hopefully it's nice dry weather so we can see some good footy.
Agreed. I think there's just too many players coming in for Collingwood or in and out in the last few weeks, in particular coming into this week. Collingwood, the Cats have had a fairly stable list of 22 for the last couple weeks, and I think their performance against Brisbane was severely underrated. So I think they'll just be far too good. And as I said, I think they have their number. The most interesting game of the finals will probably be GWS against the Dogs. I was reading an article earlier and it kind of billed it as the individual versus the system. What do you think is going to happen?
I think the Bulldogs will win this comfortably. I think one team is in free fall and one team is sprinting up the ladder, and the Giants are just not playing great footy at the moment. Um, but maybe you never know. They might be boosted by Canelio re-signing this week. So you never know with finals footy as well. But I really think the form the Dogs have been in has just been too good. I think anyone that comes up against the Dogs week 1 of the finals is probably going to lose.
So that means the Dogs for you,
Well and truly, I think 8 goals.
8 goals.
Yep.
All right. I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and I think the stars of the Giants will step up and they will scrape home by under a goal.
Oh, that'd be good to watch.
Yeah, it will be an excellent game either way. Yeah, I just have a weird feeling about that game. And a reverse fixture of a game that happened a week or two ago. The Lions play host to the Tigers.
Yep, up in the Gabatoir. I back Brisbane in. I think they came down here and showed a lot of toughness. It looked to be all put away in the first quarter and first half, but they really fought back in the third quarter and showed a lot and showed that they're not just a young team that crumbles under the first little bit of pressure. And I think it being in Brisbane gives them a huge advantage. They've played really well there this season, so it'll be good to see Richmond get a real test. And I think Lions by 2 goals.
I agree with the Lions prediction. I think their loss to Richmond was more valuable than Richmond's win over the Lions, and they would have learnt a lot from that. And I think for them, up against Richmond at the G, the MCG, not the Gabba, during the season was just a free hit, and they got to play around with things and really prepare for the finals, whereas Richmond needed to throw the kitchen sink and make top 4. So I think the Lions will prove too good at the Gabba, in particular because the Gabba's definitely changed over the course of the season from, maybe packed houses that was split between the Lions and the visiting team. I think it's definitely a large majority now of Lions supporters, which is really good for the boys playing to have their home stadium support their team. So yeah, I think the Lions will be too good. And that's pretty much it for the first week of finals. Mitch, last question before we leave the footy. Who's your early prediction for the premiership?
I'd have to say, and as much as it kills me to say this, I'd have to say Richmond. You got to win finals at the MCG, and at the moment they're the best team at the MCG. So I'd say they're my favourites for the flag.
I'm going to go on a limb, and for no reason whatsoever, my early prediction is the Cats. Turning our attention to US sport, and joining us as always, except for last week when she was sick, but she's all good now, is Danielle Allentook from the New York Times. Danielle, it's awesome to have you on the show. How you going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm excellent that we get to talk about American sport, and we'll start with, well, not quite American sport, but the tennis is in New York at the moment, and a lot of talking points. But we'll start with the big American talking point, and Coco and Osaka played in sort of a match highlighting the future of American tennis, if you will, with Coco just 15. And the big talking point, I guess, is the post-match interview. What do you guys over there see?
Yeah, so to put this match in perspective and sort of how big of a deal these two people are in the US right now, this was played in Arthur Ashe Stadium. And that is the stadium that you'll usually see like Serena Williams or all the big stars go in. And these are still two very young people. Coco is 15 and Naomi is 22. But basically what happened was Coco didn't have her best match, and Naomi kind of, in lack of better terms, kind of crushed her and finished it out quickly. And Coco, as a 15-year-old, was a little emotional after the match. She was crying a little bit. And at the net, when they went to go shake hands, Naomi told Coco that she wanted her to do the post-match interview with her, which is kind of rare for the loser to come into the interview with the winner. But Naomi was like, Coco, you've had such a good summer. You deserve part of the spotlight. I mean, she came out of nowhere. So she does the interview. And it was this big emotional thing where Coco was just really thankful to be there. And Naomi, everybody was giving a lot of credit to Naomi. This is the second awkward situation she's been in because she was in an awkward situation with Serena Williams last year. So it was definitely a unique situation and one that's kind of gone viral a little bit.
Yeah, personally for me, I felt a little bit like uncomfortable watching a 15-year-old cry in front of me, but it was touching at the same time. In other big news at the US Open, and Djokovic, the defending champion, he went out with a shoulder injury, much to the delight of probably Federer and Nadal. Has there been any fallout from that, or is it just sort of starting to sink in what that means for the tournament?
I mean, there hasn't been too much just happened late last night, so I think the world kind of still catching up to what happened. He had said he got into the match with sore left shoulder, and I mean, he was down too far in that match to probably come back and win it. So it does kind of make sense why he pulled out. A lot of people are criticizing him for pulling out. But I mean, it opens the door for somebody else to come in.
Yeah, exactly. In particular, Medvedev in the Federer bracket, who's just having an unbelievable an unbelievable US tour at the moment after winning Cincinnati. And also Wawrinka, I mean, even prior to the match, to be completely honest, I actually had Wawrinka as maybe not a certainty to win, but his game definitely matches well against Djokovic, and even without the injury to Djokovic, he's beaten him in 2 Slam finals. So it was always going to be a great match, regardless. But unfortunately, Djokovic went out, and unfortunately, also for the Aussies, Demonor and Kyrgios went out too. But it really sets up an intriguing men's side of the draw, and we'd probably get another Federer Nadal Classic final. So that's good for them. And on the women's side, 3 Americans still remain. What's the excitement like for Arne Townsend in particular? She's got a tough game against Andreescu and also Williams.
Yeah, I mean, Williams, there's always so much hype around her. I mean, so I was covering a tournament one night, she like walked by me and like, as journalists, you're supposed to be like, play it cool, but I had never seen Celia Williams in person before, and I was like very excited to see her. Yes, Serena Williams looks good as ever, and it's insane. She's not old by any means, but she's getting older, and it's pretty crazy that she's still able to play that well. She's definitely, I think in my opinion, the favorite.
Yeah, it'll have to be between her and Osaka. You'd have to think it would have been nice as an Aussie to have Ash Barty versus Serena Williams, as Wang ended up beating her. Now Wang's versing Williams. So yeah, that would have been a matchup that I would have loved to see, and it would have been on Arthur Ashe for sure, and
Yeah.
it would have been an unbelievable match. But I'm going to put you on the spot here and just quickly get your predictions for the men's and women's singles. Do you think it'll be a Federer Nadal final?
I think the U.S. would love to see that. I think it would bring a large crowd. I think for the woman, it will be Serena versus Naomi. And I think that would be a great rematch as well. That's kind of what I'm rooting for.
And if it's a Serena Naomi final, who's your money on?
So that's complicated just because of what happened at the U.S. Open last year. I think Serena, if that's the case, Serena's going to go into that match with, she wants revenge. She kind of got gypped last year. But I also think Naomi plays it so cool. She's got her composure so down, and Naomi doesn't have the same experience level that Serena does, but she has the talent and the drive. So I think it just depends on who's on that day.
I completely agree. And I think if those two finals eventuate, all fans will get their money's worth. Moving on to MLB and some big news coming out of the league. Tell us more.
Yeah, so there have been probably 2 big stories this week, kind of the opposite ends of the spectrum. So the sadder news, we'll start with that and do the happy after. Tyler Skaggs, who was an Angels pitcher, he passed away last month. The autopsy report just came back, and it showed that he had fentanyl and Oxycontin and alcohol in his system when he died. So there's kind of this big controversy right now of how did this starting pitcher, first of all, get the drugs and the alcohol in the middle of the season when they were on the road, and is somebody else responsible for maybe giving him these knowing that they could possibly kill him? So it's a big deal right now. It's still really early on in the investigation, but that autopsy definitely started a lot of questions. And then for the good baseball news, Justin Verlander had his 3rd no-hitter last night. And, he already has a Hall of Fame career, but, 3 no-hitters is insane. The list of people who have done that is so small.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what the investigation comes up with. Moving on to the NFL, and the season is upon us. And as an NFL fan myself, I'm very excited. Let's quickly go through each division and just see who we think will probably come out, and maybe a quick preview of how we think the season will go and who might make the playoffs. And we'll start with the AFC East: the Bills, the Dolphins, the Patriots, and the Jets. Who do you think will come out on top?
I think the Jets will have a decent season, but I don't think anybody can touch the Patriots.
Yeah, I think it's as simple as that. Tom Brady equals GOAT, equals playoffs, equals Super Bowl. It's as simple as that. And I just don't see anyone else rising to the Patriots levels. I don't really think any of the other teams. I think they'll be in the hunt for wild cards, but I'm not sure if they'll be good enough. Kind of depends how good of a start they get. In the AFC West, we have the Broncos, the Chiefs, the Chargers, and the Raiders. So it's a much tighter division, in my opinion. Who do you think will get up?
I agree with you about the tighter division. I think the Chiefs have kind of in the past couple of years established themselves at the top of that division. They kind of see themselves doing that again. But the Chargers, I think, will be a solid wild card pick.
I think I'm gonna turn your prediction around and go the Chargers will win and the Chiefs will get the wild card. And I think I'm just going to base that on the fact that the Chiefs don't have Kareem Hunt in the backfield, and I think that really, really helps Mahomes give him time and give him a time to give the wide receivers time to get more space, because with a player like Kareem, you're naturally going to stack the box a bit more to stop the run. What do you think about that?
I mean, I have personal vendettas against him just because of all he's done off the field. So to me, I don't like to count that in. I don't know. I think Patrick Mahomes is now, for lack of a better word, he's kind of a veteran now. He's been in this. He knows what to do. I wouldn't worry too much about him.
Fair enough. It'll be a very interesting division, especially with the Broncos defense and, well, the question mark over the Raiders, will they, won't they? But yeah, it'll be a great division. And speaking of great division, the AFC North, apart from the Bengals, you have the Ravens, the Browns and the Steelers all vying for champ. Who do you think will get on top?
Okay, I think this division is going to be very close between the Ravens, Steelers, and Browns, but I'm going to go Browns with Baker Mayfield.
I'm going to refrain from commenting on this division as my Steelers are in it. But I'm just going to say hashtag don't rule out the Steelers. That's it from me.
I think it'll be close, but I think the Browns will get it.
Well, if the Browns get it, put their entire team together, it'll be very hard to stop. But in saying that, as a Steelers man, I know that having all the talent on the roster doesn't equate to wins. I mean, Brown, Bryant, Ben, and Bell, and we still couldn't put it together with a good line. So, we'll have to wait and see, but the Browns look dangerous as well. Moving on to the South, the AFC South, you have the Texans, the Colts, the Jaguars, and the Titans. Bit of an interesting division in that there's no real sort of superstar team there. What do you make of that division?
I don't even know what to make of them right now. I mean, I would have had my money on the Colts, but no Andrew Luck. I don't know what their other quarterback can do, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, it'll definitely with Andrew Luck out. I think that just opens up the entire division to all four of them. The Texans, they made some interesting moves in the last week, giving up a lot of draft capital for some. Well, I wouldn't say premier talents, given what two first rounders got the Bears in Khalil Mack.
I mean, I would have had my money on the Texans without the Colts, but I don't really trust these trades. I don't know how they're going to work out, especially it's so late.
Yeah.
I still think the Colts and Texans are the two. I think one of them will come out. I don't think the Titans or the Jaguars can compete. I just don't really know at this point which one. And I don't see either of them being better than like a 9-7.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird division now that Andrew Luck's gone, and the Jags are kind of, who knows, their defense is either amazing or their team just kind of does what they did last season. So got no idea on that division, and we'll just have to wait and see who starts well. Moving on to the NFC, and we'll start in the East. A big division. We have the Cowboys, the Giants, the Eagles, and the Redskins. Where do you even start with that one?
All right. Giants and Redskins, I'm not putting them at more than 5 wins each. And then I'm putting Cowboys and Eagles with more than 10 wins. So I think the Cowboys can be good if all their players can get off the field together. But if they can't, then they're just going to fall apart. And then the Eagles will sweep then.
I think the Eagles, if Carson Wentz stays healthy, I think they'll comfortably win the division. As I've seen with the Steelers, having off-field drama can often dampen on-field performances. So for the Cowboys' sake, I hope they, as you rightly said, fix their off-field doo-doo up, and Zeke gets his act together and signs a deal. We'll move to the NFC West, and we have the Cardinals, the Rams, the 49ers, and the Seahawks. Personally, I think this is a 2-horse race. What do you think?
I think it's the Rams out ahead.
No chance to the Seahawks?
So I think the thing with the Seahawks is they're always there, but they never quite win the division.
So you think they'll be more of a wild card team?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they'll have a bad season. I mean, they're getting some of the benefits from this Texans move, but I don't quite see them taking down the Rams. I think the Cardinals are just going to have another disastrous season. I mean, they've already had a pretty disastrous preseason.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think if Aaron Donald stays healthy and Todd Gurley's body doesn't fall apart, I think the Rams will just blow the NFL away, let alone their division. So I think they'll get on top as well. Moving on to the NFC North. Another interesting one with, in my opinion, 3 contenders. You have the Bears, the Lions, the Packers, and the Vikings. Who's your money on in that one?
I see the Packers, Bears, and Vikings being pretty close. I like the Bears with Khalil Mack.
It's a fascinating contest. The Bears kind of rests on Mitchell Trubisky and how well he does. And the Packers, I mean, you can never discount Aaron Rodgers, but
he is past his prime, though, in my opinion.
Well, we've been saying that about Tom Brady for I don't even know how many years now. But I think the Packers just don't have enough talent around Rodgers for him to do anything. Aaron Rodgers, and the Vikings look primed to make a stilt at it, but I think the safe bet here is the Bears, and the final division, the Falcons, the Panthers, the Saints, and the Bucks. I mean, it's another tight division, but personally, I think I'm going to have to put my money on Drew Brees.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I don't actually see this division being that tight. I see the Saints running away from it. I mean, they're pretty much the same team they were last year, and I know they didn't go on to the Super Bowl or anything like that, but I mean, Drew Brees can command an offense, and he's already proven himself, and he's the type of quarterback that doesn't necessarily need a ton of people around him to succeed.
Yeah, I think the Saints will win it as well, but you can never discount, Matty Ryan and Julio Jones from the Falcons, and Cam Newton's Cam Newton, but he can sort of either turn it on or kind of rely on Christian McCaffrey a bit too much. So we'll have to see with that one. And look, we've gone through all the teams. Do you have an early prediction for maybe a team to look out for, or maybe you feel confident to put a team at the top of the NFL?
I hate to say it because it's so cliche. It's the go-to answer, but I just don't think you can ever count out the Patriots.
Yeah, I would have probably said the same. They got better since the last Super Bowl, and they won the last Super Bowl. So, kind of watch out, NFL.
Yes, I agree.
Well, thanks for coming on this week, and I look forward to talking to you next week.
Bye. Have a great week.
in an EPL week marred by more VAR controversy, as if there could be any more, with Aston Villa seemingly denied a goal and the Hammers denied a penalty. We won't talk about VAR because there's much more important things to talk about, in particular in the EPL. And joining us on the show is a good friend of our show, Pete Lynch. Pete, welcome to the show. And look, we won't get into the VAR, but what a weekend of football it was, and in particular the EPL.
Hey mate, thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, as always, it's just good to have football back on TV. But yeah, particularly this weekend was just something else, I think, for results. You know, you had Chelsea, pretty interesting game there at Stamford Bridge. Liverpool going, the only team unbeaten, but City looking pretty sharp as well.
Yeah. Look, we'll start with the first game of the week, and we'll start with we won't say the biggest talking point because we still have to get to the North London derby and Frank Lampard, but United limped to another draw despite having a numerical advantage for the last portion of the game. Just couldn't break the game open. Their attackers just didn't seem like they had a desire to break open Southampton. And I said it in the first after the first game against Chelsea that they found their identity having gotten rid of Lukaku and now Sanchez, but kind of seems like they've lost it since there. How'd you see it?
I just don't know what to make of Man United at the minute. I mean, I just don't know how you can go from just hammering Chelsea first game of the season and everyone thinks, oh, United are back, and now drawing 1 each at Southampton after losing to Palace at home last weekend. So, yeah, I mean, as you say, it could have been a fresh start without Sanchez, without Lukaku kind of, overshadowing, performances on the pitch. But then again, you look at the guys that stayed there, Paul Pogba, Marcus Rashford. I mean, that was probably one of the worst performances of Pogba I've ever seen in a United shirt, honestly. And Rashford wasn't much better. So it's not good. 5 points from 4 games, and they only picked up fewer, I think, in 1992-93 season, which is insane. So I'd be worried if I was a United fan. I really would, particularly given that display there on Saturday. But James, I guess 3 goals in 4 games for him. So that's probably the only positive that they can take right now.
Yeah. James has been somewhat of a revelation for United and their fans. I just wonder if they didn't really make any big signings. Obviously, Maguire went for big money, but I don't think he's necessarily a big signing. I just wonder, and I'm going to pose something to you, Pete. I just wonder if, given Lukaku and Sanchez is now gone, so that's quite a bit of money off the books, even though United still have to pay quite a large sum of Sanchez's wage. But that's 80 million or 70 million for Lukaku, and I didn't really check how much Sanchez has gone. But I just wonder if, with those two out of the side, out of Manchester United, does that give Solskjaer a bit of I know you said a fresh start before, but does it give him a bit of time to sort of start to set his identity with players that he brings in, as opposed to players that he inherited when he got the job?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think he came out and said he's gonna spend Lukaku and the money from Lukaku in January anyway. So that's gonna go even further to instill in his own team and his own philosophy, if you say that, yeah. But I mean, he still has to work with those players there, and he did bring in Maguire, he did bring in Wan-Bissaka, and James, who's obviously had a good start to the season. But you still expect the other players to step up and do their job. De Gea, players like that. Ashley Young's their captain, which I just don't get at all, really.
Yeah, he shouldn't even be in the squad, let alone the captain.
No, I know. It's very strange. Just given United's history in the Premier League. But Mason Greenwood coming up as well. Solskjaer, he likes his youth, he likes his young players, so maybe that's something he's going to focus on. And I think obviously James, we've said it again and again, he's been good, but I think Scott McTominay's been their best player this season. Really young guy in the middle of midfield. And the money you spend on Pogba, and instead you have a young guy coming through the youth system like that. So, yeah, probably, not much of a fresh start, but just his time to really get his team going and the way he wants it to go. But not a good start with a draw at Southampton. No disrespect to Southampton, but you still expect Man United to be beating them in the Premier League.
It still baffles me that Paul Pogba is playing in a deeper role than sort of your number 10, your attacking midfield. I just don't see him as a defensive midfielder or even a central midfielder or number 8 sort of position. So I think to really utilize Pogba, just like Juve did, and why he was so highly touted and ended up coming to United, Juve just gave him the freedom to be where he needed to be to make an impact, and I feel like he's just a bit too restricted at United. But I think Solskjaer will get one more big transfer window, and I'm not talking about January. I mean the next big summer transfer. It's weird for me to say that because it's the opposite. It's winter here, but I think he'll get one more big summer transfer, and then from then on, his results will drive whether he keeps his job. Do you reckon that's about right?
Yeah, I think you're right. He just has to be careful, I guess, because he really did spend big on trying to strengthen that defense, and it's not as if. Well, he obviously had a good start, but you can't be shipping 2 goals to Palace, a goal here at Southampton, sorry. If you do take like Van Dijk, for example, again, Liverpool brought him in, and it wasn't just like he's just taken Liverpool's defence to a new level, and the amount of clean sheets they kept last season is what United should be trying to aim for as well. But it hasn't worked out that way so far. But so I guess he's got to focus on a midfield maybe. I saw someone's trying to persuade Jamie Vardy to go to Man United, but I don't know I just don't know where they need to strengthen. They obviously trust Rashford up top, but I don't know if he can do that on his own. They have Martial in there, who they spent big on a couple of years ago. So it's going to be interesting. I think he'll get another summer transfer window, but however well he does, it remains to be seen.
I highly doubt Vardy will ever leave Leicester, at least in the foreseeable future. I think he's just the kind of person that would just thrives at Leicester. In spite of United's troubles, it's a valuable point for Southampton, and on the balance of play, I guess they kind of deserved a point. I don't think United really did anything to scream that they lost 2 points, but it's a good win. It's a good, I suppose, a mental win for Southampton, but not really too much else to say about that. The other big talking point from the round is Lampard. And look, I told you weeks ago when Lampard was appointed that it was a bad move for both parties, and I don't want to say I'm starting to get justification for my prediction, but it's looking like a solid prediction.
You might be right. They're obviously same as Man United, 5 points from 4 games, but I think they're 6 goals worse off. Their goal difference is -3, which is not what Lampard expected, I'm sure, and what the fans expected. But the game on Saturday just shows, first of all, Sheffield United deserve huge credit for not giving up. But more importantly, Chelsea, I think it's just going to take some time for Lampard, and it's tough because it's a results-driven business. He might not have time, and we know all about Chelsea, where managers just do not have any time to get things right and get things their own way. But yeah, it's whenever they play, it's a high press for 90 minutes, which is just it's hard to sustain. Especially, and it's not even just the young guys coming in; it's the experienced players as well. You know, Aspilicueta, Jorginho, they're struggling with it as well. So you can't just pin it on the young guys who have been unbelievable. You know, Mason Mount and obviously Tammy Abraham, another 2 goals for him. So it is just a strange situation for Chelsea to be in, but not their best result, definitely.
It's a weird combination to kind of have a. I'm not quite sure if they're a deep defending team, but they're definitely a counter-attacking team that relies on their pace and skill, and they're winning it in the right areas of the pitch, and taking off from there. It's definitely a weird combination to put together without having a sustained period of possession. The reason why City are able to press high and win the ball back is because they have 60, 70, 80% of the possession, and their players are fresh, and it's much easier to sustain your legs with the ball at your feet than chasing your tail and chasing some other guy who's got the ball. And same with Liverpool. They have a very similar style, quick attacking, counter-attacking football, but they still know how to conserve their energy and allow for that press when it's necessary. But all the players know when to press and also when to conserve themselves, and that's the difference. It just seems like Lampard's like gung ho, press for 90 minutes and no account for the fadeaway, and the fade is just happening week in week out now. And also he's just made some decisions that confuse me. You're up against Sheffield. Why are you taking Kovacic off? He's like one of your more experienced players in a really young team. Why are you taking him off for a young player? Why are you bringing in a new centre back who's really young when you need the 3 points against a weaker team that you should win against? As I said last week, he just has moments where you just question why he's making those decisions.
Yeah, you're right. That was a strange one. Tomori and for Christensen, who's obviously, he's a young guy, but he's a lot more experienced. He's played in some huge games for Chelsea, and he can play football. And the subs, yeah, Kovacic off, Batshuayi on, which just makes no sense at all whatsoever. And also, they brought on young guy in Billy Gilmore, only 18, and don't get me wrong, he's going to be an absolute star. They brought him in from Rangers, and it's obviously great to give him some experience, but you're 2-1 up against Sheffield United. It's not the time to be doing it, in my opinion. 3-0 up, maybe 4-0 up. Yeah, go for it, definitely. But yeah, you're right. Just some strange decisions, and maybe that's because of Lampard's lack of experience in a managerial role.
Yeah, it could also be the fact that he knows he's going to get time, like he's been given a guarantee from Abramovich or something. I mean, we don't know as sort of journalists and fans, but it could be an experience. But maybe we could also throw him a bone and say that he knows he's going to get more time, so he's trying to prepare for the future given the ban. Maybe
Yeah.
we don't know, but. Yeah, anything could really be the answer, but I mean, from a strictly tactical point, I'd almost say it's inept. But as I just said, there could be other factors at players to why he's made his decisions.
I think they're probably still trying to cope with life without Hazard as well. To be honest with you, maybe they just haven't got over that, because that's 100% the kind of game that he could win. If you're maybe 2 each, or you're 2-1 up, or it's tight, Hazard's your man. You're calling on every single week to do that, to just produce magic and win you the game on his own. So yeah, maybe that's having an effect as well.
And given the troubles to Chelsea, United, Arsenal, and Spurs, and we'll get to the Arsenal Spurs game in a bit, does this is an interesting question. Does the top 4 open up for Leicester, Everton, and the Hammers?
No, I still think they're far too far off that, to be honest with you. I think Liverpool and City are miles ahead, and then I think but I still think your top 6 is pretty much set. You've still got Spurs, Arsenal, Chelsea, and we're saying they're not great, Chelsea or United, but I still think they're a cut above it whenever it comes to it. Yeah, they've drawn here. Both of them drew in the weekend, but obviously Leicester won, West Ham won. But I still think it's only 4 games in. It is really, really early days. Obviously, there's a lot of new signings coming in who need some time to gel. But yeah, it's an interesting point. Leicester, Everton, West Ham. That's particularly Leicester. I don't think it'll be far off at all. They're sitting 3rd at the minute. Everton's in 6th, West Ham 7th. So they won't be far off. But for me, I still think the top 6 is set in stone.
Everton made some big signings as well over the summer with Moise Kean, Iwobi, and they have a solid all round team as well with the number 1 English keeper as well in Pickford. So I wouldn't be surprised if either Leicester or Everton finish in the top 4, given the struggles we've mentioned for the other big clubs. So. Yeah, I'd keep my eye out on Leicester and Everton, but it'll be exciting to watch either way. And, speaking of which, Spurs, Arsenal, was a great game. But before we get to the game, I wanted to ask, with the transfer window about to slam shut in Europe, will Spurs finally start to come out and play?
Yeah, I think mainly because of the fact they won't lose Christian Eriksen. I think that's been worrying them for quite some time, and he scored yesterday. It just shows how much of a player he is for them. Yeah, I think they'll be able to, because they've just had another strange one. It's always weird with Pochettino and Spurs and transfer windows. You never know what they're going to do. They've obviously brought in Ndombele and Sessegnon, players like that, who are going to help them big time. But I think keeping Eriksen is it's a brand new signing almost, because he's that important to them. His passing, his delivery, set pieces, his goals, everything, his assists. So yeah, maybe they'll calm down a bit now and push on. And obviously Lo Celso to come in, he hasn't been given much time, but I think he needs some time to just settle in and get a few games under his belt.
Yeah, Christian Eriksen is the difference maker for Spurs. Make no mistake. Besides how good Son, Ali, Kane, Mora, Lo Celso, Lamela, Sissoko, Ndombele, despite how good any of them are, Eriksen is the link for all of them. And he finds the hole better than anyone else between the midfield and the opposition's defense. And his delivery, I think, is up there with the likes of David Silva and KDB. Whether he's on the same level as those two is a different argument for a different day, but he's definitely up there with those two. And I completely agree that he will be their biggest, in inverted commas, signing of the window.
Yeah, definitely.
And keeping him and also Vertonghen, I think, is huge for Spurs, and having the certainty that they'll stay till at least January, I think will pardon the pun, spur them on to kick into gear and really, really continue challenging for the Premier League despite all the memes about that. And moving on to their North London derby, their rival, and Arsenal have their own problems at the backers. And David Luiz again had an absolute stinker. He cost, I think, the first goal. He just goes into challenges willy-nilly without regard for what he's doing, and then gets caught out of position and makes it really hard for an inexperienced, not overly great backline to cope with the likes of Kane and Eriksson and superstars of the game.
I think you gotta give him, just don't go full in at him. I think it was Socrates who was at fault for the first one. But yeah, Louise again, it's just I wouldn't want him in my defense. He just has his moments. He can be good, he can be bad. And you just don't want that. You just want someone who's going to be good 100% of the time. But he's got his mistakes, and Leno obviously made a mistake as well for the goal. But yeah, it's just a strange one. They knew they needed to strengthen their back four. And whether or not they did, it's just like it hasn't been answered. I think Kieran Tierney, I keep on saying it, he's going to be massive for them, but he's still another couple of weeks away from full fitness. Maitland-Niles, right back, really young guy. I think they need Bellerin back in there, even though he's been impressive. But it's the Premier League; it's not easy. But the two centre halves, I just don't rate. Socrates and Louise, I just do not rate at all. And it's sad because of that front three. Pepe, Lacazette, Aubameyang are going to be so good this year, especially playing together. Pepe looks like a really decent signing. And Aubameyang and Lacazette, they speak for themselves. They know where the net is. But it's just annoying that they didn't sort it out. But maybe Tierney will try and solve a bit of it. Yeah.
I guess all the talking points we just discussed sort of eventuated in the North London derby, and that Spurs were benefited by having Eriksson, and Arsenal let themselves down at the back early on, and as you just said, their front three just pulled them out of a deficit of 2 goals, and I guess the 2-2 draw ended up being a somewhat fair result given a sort of a tale of two halves. Yeah, I think both teams have a massive ceiling in the season, particularly Arsenal with their front three. I really like Pepe. He's got futsal feet, which is a big plus for me. And for those that don't know, futsal feet for me is just really strong, quick feet, and just in a really good in tight areas, particularly with his dribbling and game awareness. Sometimes he does a bit too much, which also could be down to futsal. But I really like futsal feet, as the likes of Ronaldinho has proven. I'm not saying that he's anywhere near as good, but that sort of futsal can help people. But I think Tottenham will be conceding just before halftime. I think they would have gone on to win if they didn't concede so close to the halftime whistle. So that probably let them down. But there's really not too much to talk about the game. As we just said, it just sort of played out exactly how you'd think. Eriksson helped Spurs going forward, and Arsenal's defence stopped them from taking 3 points. So it's kind of a bit of exactly where do you expect London derby. Before we get onto Liverpool, the other big game for me this week was Everton Wolves, and we'll quickly go over that. It was a big game for both clubs. I think both clubs have top 7 or 8 aspirations, and I thought the game lived up to all expectations, and both clubs did themselves no disservice despite the result for Wolves.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It's going to be 2 teams. We mentioned Leicester and West Ham, but yeah, Wolves and Everton are both going to be challenging for that top 6 spot if they can break through it. Richarlison was the main man, I think, wasn't he? Just getting 2 goals up and running for the season. In front of his family as well from Brazil, which was amazing to see, given how far he's come in his career in pretty rapid space of time. But and Jimenez as well at the other end, he just continues to impress. He just knows where the net is, and he's still their main man. They've signed Catrone from AC Milan, but Jimenez is still who they're going to rely on for their goals. He's just underrated. He's going to be good again for this season in Europe as well. He's banging them in. So if he keep that up, but it's going to be really tough for them because of the fact they're going to be playing, on a Thursday night in the Europa League.
Yeah, I
traveling
completely agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they're going to need their squad, yeah, which they do. They had João Moutinho on the bench, even Diego Jota on the bench. Morgan Gibbs-White, Neto, all these players. So they're going to need to use that squad, and I think it is going to be tough. Yeah.
Yeah, the reason why I didn't have them with Leicester, Everton, and Hammers for potentially challenging the top four is exactly what you just said. They have more games this season than they did last season, and I think Europe will cost them in the end. And it showed today against Everton. I think if they wanted to challenge for that top four, that top six sort of area of the table, I think they needed to get a positive result from today. And I mean, obviously, that doesn't dampen any aspirations they should have for the top four, but these are the kind of games against rivals in your area of the table that you should be getting a positive result. But in saying that, 3-2 away from home against a really good Everton side is not all is lost for Wolves, but I think Europe will definitely cost them. We'll finish in the Premier League with potentially a bit of trouble in paradise as look, it's well documented on this podcast and in my discussions with Pete that I think Salah is wildly overrated and greedy as anything, and it popped its head up in extraordinary fashion on the weekend with I thought the most docile player ever in Mane sort of blowing up on the bench. You're a Liverpool fan, Pete. What do you make of all of that?
I can't agree with you that Salah's overrated, but I can agree with you that he's greedy, But I don't think it's going to be brushed aside. Klopp said it happens, and it does happen. I think there's a lot worse problems to have than your forwards trying to score goals, and I think that's what it was. Mane had every right to be angry. Salah 100% should have passed it. He does. Anytime he gets onto that left foot, Salah, you know what he's going to do, which is worrying because defenders are going to realise that as well. He's going to just shoot, and it hasn't really worked out for him so far. But I think Klopp will get that out of his system straight away. We had players like Sturridge used to do it all the time, and look where he is. Obviously not as talented as Salah, but Klopp will definitely stamp it out. And I think what makes it much worse is exactly that Mane is just the complete opposite. And even further to the extreme, Firmino, absolutely the most selfless player I've ever seen. He's just so unselfish. He's just the complete polar opposite to Salah. And that's what you want from your forwards, people who are going to set up others, happy to see your teammates score goals. So I think it happens everywhere else as well. I think it happens at City as well. Players want to take penalties. Aguero and Sterling falling out, players like that, which I think is just silly. You should just be happy for your teammates and for your team to score goals. But yeah, Mane had every right to do that. So it needs to just stop pretty much straight away, and I think it will. I think Salah will realise that he needs to release the ball a lot more.
Well, this is exactly where Jurgen Klopp earns his money in situations like this. And for Liverpool's sake, I hope that Salah sort of, well, he puts his head down a lot when he's dribbling, and like just on the particular chance where he missed Firmino, he shot with his right foot. He basically passed it to the goalkeeper instead of passing it to Firmino, and that's exactly why I think Salah is overrated, because he just misses opportunities to set teammates up in better situations. And, people will shove his stats in my face, his goals, his assists, whatever it is to tell me I'm wrong about Salah, which is completely fine. I never want to be right that I think a player is not as good as everyone says he is. But when I see Salah dribbling with his head to the ground, which I was taught not to do in my first season as a junior, and when I see him just almost have blinkers on like a horse, it just feels to me that something has to give in Salah. Either he'll become the player that everyone says he is and everyone knows he can be, or that he will sort of go the opposite direction and just sort of start to peter out. Because let's face it, he's no Cristiano Ronaldo who just bangs it in from any place on the pitch with any foot or any part of his body. So, look, something has to give, in my opinion, and I'm happy to be wrong about Salah, but I just think if you dribble with your head down and you don't release your teammates who are in a much better position, you're just asking for trouble. And it might just be two chances against Burnley, who you beat 3-0, or it might just come up in the back end of the season when you need that W and you take the greedy option and don't score.
I was just about to say that. Yeah, he completely got away with it, and it's exactly because it's 3-0 victory against Burnley. But yeah, whenever it's 0-0 against City, and Salah does that, then it's a problem. Then it's a real problem. But I don't see it being a long-term problem at all. It's a couple of games into the season, and we know what he's like. But I seriously do think Klopp will just shoot that out of his system straight away, or else he could he's got players on the bench who can come on, take Salah's place if it's going to come to that. Shaqiri, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Origi, the list goes on. So I think Salah will wise up pretty soon. I think he has to.
Yeah, well, for his sake, I hope he has to. With you said that it's only been a couple games of the season, and it's very true. But I've definitely noticed this about Salah over the last sort of season prior to this, and I pointed out a particular situation against Southampton last season, where the exact sort of situation that we just said, like you needed a dub, and instead of passing off to Firmino in a better position, he took the shot, and he scored, and that's great. But as soon as those shots don't go in, I mean, thankfully Liverpool have, as you just said, Origi and Shaqiri and Harry Wilson coming through the ranks as well. So I mean, for Liverpool's sake, I hope Salah comes good, but just from a pure analytical scouting sense, some of the things that Salah does just really infuriates me as a football fan. But enough about my deep-seated. He's not hate. I love Salah. He's a great bloke, but my willingness to tell people that I don't rate Salah as highly to see their reaction. We'll get away from that, and we'll move to the Spanish league. And look, of the big three, the two Madrids and Barcelona, only Atletico Madrid has a perfect record. So what do you reckon, Pete? Do you reckon La Liga's got better, or it's just been a bit of a slow start for the two super clubs in Spain?
I mean, it kind of has to be that it's a slow start, in my opinion, because particularly how Real Madrid and Barcelona have strengthened. They would have wanted both of them to, be in Atletico Madrid's position, 3 wins from 3. But it is just crazy how that happens. Madrid sitting in 5th, Barcelona in 8th. It's just strange. Madrid obviously haven't lost yet, but 2 draws and a victory is just not the way they wanted. And especially this weekend, man that helped them to that draw, Gareth Bale, 2 goals. It just shows how important he is, and it's embarrassing for them, in my opinion, after everything that happened. He's rescued them, and it's time after time. He did pick up a red card in the end of it, but I don't think that mattered to Zidane because he drew them the game in the 86th minute. So yeah, good start for Atletico Madrid, but I do think Barcelona are missing Messi. Obviously, I think that's one win in their last 8 without Messi, and they drew again this weekend against Osasuna, newly promoted side, which is not what they would have seen coming into the new season. So no, I still think Real Madrid and Barcelona will be fighting it out, but I hope Atletico will be there as well.
Atletico haven't had the most convincing, 3 wins and 0 losses sort of start. I mean, 1-0, I think, and the most recent game they came from 2-0 down to beat who'd they beat? Eibar, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Who aren't exactly, front runners for La Liga. So I think Atletico have their work cut out for them as well, which kind of makes me think that maybe La Liga sort of stepped up a notch. Maybe not. I'm just going off the fact that the big 3 clubs have all struggled against what should be lesser opposition. So, I hope for La Liga's sake that it is the fact that everyone else has raised their standards. But I guess we'll sort of get a better read of it, 10 weeks into the season when Messi, Hazard, Suarez, and the rest of Real Madrid's extensive injury list, sort of when everyone comes back for both respective clubs and we get to see their full potential.
Yeah, definitely. They obviously need Hazard back because just how good a player he is, but I just don't know where he's going to fit into that team. Just the amount of players that they have and the amount of players they signed. They went for Jovic and Benzema up front. Bale, Vasquez, Cruz, Casemiro. It's just even their Carvajal, Varane, Ramos, Mendy, and Courtois. That team should not be drawing against Villarreal. Obviously, no disrespect to them, and even Vinicius Junior on the bench, Marcelo, Modric, Militao, with Hazard still to come in. So it is really insane. And you could say the same about Barcelona. Obviously they need Messi back, but they've got Griezmann up there. De Jong in midfield, Vidal on their bench today, and obviously the 16-year-old Fati coming on and scoring a goal, which is just insane. But it's going to be an interesting season. I guess you can compare Atletico. You mentioned them. They haven't been maybe worthy of their 100% record, but I think I would almost be tempted to say the same about Liverpool. Compare the two, because Liverpool haven't been at their best. Definitely not. They've kind of almost stolen a few results at the start of the season. So obviously not on Saturday, or they beat Burnley comfortably, but just edging past Southampton as well. So it is going to be interesting to see how it goes in Spain.
Yeah, it's good for Atletico's title aspirations that they have ground out either 3 great results in 3 tight games. So that's more that can be said for Barca or Real. So as a Atletico fan, I'd be stoked with 9 points.
Mm-hmm.
We'll move on. Well, probably the game of the entire football weekend was Juve versus Napoli, and boy, oh boy, did it live up to expectations.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Just insane game of football. And it's just, I think that's going to be the 2 challengers, for the Serie A title. Obviously, Juve are going to be the main threat, but I really hope Napoli can catch them. And I would have loved to have seen a draw or even a Napoli winning that game, but it wasn't meant to be. Koulibaly with a 92nd minute OG, which is just absolutely heartbreaking.
Well, technically, Napoli did score the winner.
Yeah, it's it was just such a good game, an absolute thriller end to end. 7 different goal scores, if you count that OG. So, and it was the big players stepping up. Ronaldo, he's back at the goals. Higuain, and everyone's had his doubts about him, but Sarri seems to rate him. They obviously know each other through Napoli, their time together, but and then Manolas for Napoli, and of course Lozano off the bench to score in his debut. So he's going to be good for them this season.
Oh yeah, Lozano looks like a player.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he is a player. Doesn't look like a player. He was, I think, he was at PSV. He was electric for them.
Yeah, he was a wanted man this summer, and he ended up in Napoli. But it's just going to be interesting to see how it goes. I mean, Juve, they brought in De Ligt. Obviously, I think Chiellini was injured, went off injured. Looks like a pretty bad one, but I mean, the players they have that they can bring in, it's just they've still got Rugani there, who was linked with Arsenal. The bench: Dybala, Mandzukic, Emre Can, Rabiot. The list goes on. Bentancur, Bernardeschi,
Quadrado, Danilo, Buffon, Mandzukic.
It's ridiculous. Like I think 2 games. Inter's top of the table, 2 wins from 2. Torino, 2 wins from 2. Juve, 2 wins from 2. So I think if Juve even get the slightest lead, that'll be them top for the rest of the season.
It'll be interesting to see how Inter does, given all the hoo-ha surrounding his name has escaped me. Icardi, that's right.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how they pick themselves up. And Lukaku's already scored 2 goals, so that seems to be a good signing. But I mean, we're 2 games into the season. There's not really much we can analyze about it. Yeah, an incredible game from two teams hoping to be champions at the end of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to the Bundesliga, and Dortmund dropped points to newly promoted Union Berlin, and look, no one saw that coming, did they?
No, not one bit. I mean, 3-1. It wasn't even close. It was like that's Union Berlin's first ever Bundesliga victory, and it was against Dortmund. So what a time to do it, especially when Dortmund were trying to, come back in, steal that title off Bayern. So an absolutely huge shock, and Dortmund cannot afford that. It's against, it's like against a promoted side. But I think again, Sancho, absolutely deadly, just showing how good he is. Again, the assist for Alcacer. I just don't know how many times those two have linked up. It's just, it's really good to see, and especially a young English guy, especially England have a few internationals coming up. So, he has to be in that starting 11 for me.
I think the most impressive part about Union Berlin's win is they didn't just sort of scrape over the line. They scored their second and third goal in the 50th and 75th minute, respectively. They had 2 more shots in the game than Dortmund, 15-13. And the only part that they got dominated in was the possession. And I mean, that means nothing at the end of the game, like 74-26. Like, who cares? Union Berlin will take their 3 points all the way to the bank and just, laugh and give the middle finger to Dortmund.
Yeah, 100%.
And Bayern Munich, their main challenges, at the start of the season, we put Dortmund and Bayern as the 2 big ones for the Bundesliga, and they sort of, in spite of Dortmund's faltering, they just put the sword to Mainz 6-1.
Well, I think you got to put a bit of context in that, because Mainz are rock bottom of the league, no wins from 3 games. So, but again, I mean, we talk about Juve's squad, their squad depth, and Madrid and Barcelona, and then you look at Bayern Munich. So I do think these teams they're going to be challenging for their league titles, but if they really want to, show how good they are, they've got to be challenging for the Champions League, which is starting soon. But Coutinho in, Perisic in, and they have Serge Gnabry on the bench, Tolisso, Muller, Goretzka, Javi
Martinez,
Martinez.
Boateng.
You could just talk all day about it, but 6-1, 6 different goal scorers, Perisic off the mark. They're probably going to be, in search of another Bundesliga title this season. It's going to be hard to see past them, in my opinion.
It'll be interesting to see. I think for Coutinho, I think the most promising part about Coutinho is that he's been playing in the number 10 position for Bayern, at least on paper. I haven't watched him too extensively, so I think that'll get the best out of him, because I think at Barca he was doomed to fail as a winger, and even at Liverpool he was doomed to fail as a winger. He always made his money as an attacking midfielder. So hopefully that sees the best of Coutinho to come out for Bayern, and I think they'll be there towards the end of the Champions League as well. And we'll move on to the French league now, and the sort of two big pieces of news that come out of the French league. First, it's reported that Neymar's told his teammates that he's staying, which is huge news for PSG. I think that's really important for them. And I think it's good news for Real Madrid and Barca. I don't think either of those teams needed him or should have gone for him or should have paid anything more than like 100 mil for him, let alone 3 players plus money. I think that was absurd, which we sort of talked about last week. So I think all parties benefit from Neymar staying, in particular PSG, because they get a genuine superstar of the game. Do you reckon that was the right thing for Neymar to stay?
I mean, at first I just can't believe all the talk that went on. It's just such nonsense. If he's gonna stay in the end, which it looks like, yeah, he definitely is. So they don't need him in the league. They're top of the league already after 4 games. They were behind a bit, but now, and their goal difference just miles ahead of everyone else. Yeah.
Which is 5 more than second place Rennes.
So, I mean, like I said with Bayern, they can have all these players and have Neymar there, but if they don't challenge in Europe, then there's absolutely no point. I don't know how they can be satisfied with themselves. Just the players they have, they don't need Neymar. They're in the league, as I said, but they won 2-0 away at Metz, and guys like Choupo-Moting, who couldn't really cut it at Stoke, is playing up front and scoring goals. I think he's their top goal scorer this season. So it is interesting that he stayed there, but yeah, they're obviously getting a good player. But I'd say Neymar's probably the happiest. He's probably getting a bit more money out of them.
And Nice look like they're getting a takeover by an Englishman of all people. I didn't really catch much of what was happening. Do you know a bit more?
Yeah, it's Sir Jim Ratcliffe, Britain's richest man. Finally got his wish to take over Nice. I think he's based in Monaco, which just says everything that needs to be said, really. He owns Swiss club Lausanne Sport and Team Ineos in cycling, which is formerly Team Sky. But he's got Patrick Vieira as boss and a really young side, so it is going to be interesting to see how they did. But I think we were talking about it earlier. You mentioned Monaco. Similar sort of thing happened to them. Everyone remembers their takeover. And of course, it might actually happen to Nice. And Monaco lost literally every single player in that squad. They challenged PSG for the league. Then they lost, Mbappe, Fabinho, Bakayoko, Bernardo Silva. There's definitely
they just lost Falcao as well.
Falcao, he's gone. Jean Moutinho, players like that, and they almost got relegated from the league last season.
Well, they're in the relegation zone right now.
Again, so I mean, Nice have got to avoid that, but I do think that could happen because Nice are a really young side with a lot of talented players and a boss like Patrick Vieira. So it's going to be interesting to see how they go, but they just can't let the same thing happen to them.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see what happens with Nice. But as you said, I think the French league since Monaco sort of crashed. It's just a one-horse race. It was really sad. It sort of gives leeway to the meme that they're a farmers league.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's sort of really all that's happened in football this week. Oh no, one more thing actually happened: the Old Firm derby,
Mm-hmm.
big game, and well, Celtic sort of stamped their dominance on the Scottish league.
Yeah, I think. I mean, it was expected. It was close, but Rangers kind of lost their way a bit. It was feisty as ever a game. It was kind of a disappointment, to be honest, for a showcase in Scottish football. Because there's been a lot better games in the Old Firm over the years. I think Gerrard just got his tactics wrong. He started with Defoe instead of Morelos, which is, that game's made for a guy like Alfredo Morelos, who, fair enough, he could get sent off in the first minute or he could score a hat-trick. So you never know what you're getting. But it just shows, I think, Celtic are going to win the league again this season. They're kind of dominant, they know what they're doing, and that's a huge win for them.
And in the championship, top of the table clash between Swansea and Leeds happened, and as a Leeds man myself, I was pretty upset to fall 1-0 to Swansea, but promising signs for Leeds. I think the shot count was like 26 to like 4 or something. Hold on, I'll just get it up here. Let's see. 21 to 7 with 62 to 38% possession. Hit the post, inside of the post a couple of times, had some wonderful chances, but as a Leeds man, the same old story is coming up from last season where we create all the chances but just can't finish them.
Yeah, and you just can't let that happen for another season. Obviously everyone, I think, is in love with Bielsa, and rightly so, the way he's got them playing. They've got a lot of good players that could, push for a championship title, but as you say, yeah, if you're that amount of shots and that amount of dominance, you just can't lose 1-0 at home to Swansea. It just can't happen.
Yeah, could be telling it at the end of the season, similar to the end of last season. Not that I cared or cried or anything, but yeah, championship looks to be another interesting marathon of a season. Charlton of all currently in an automatic spot, and then you have your usual players: West Brom, Fulham, Bristol, Leeds, Swansea. They're all up there. Probably the big surprise is that Huddersfield is on 1 point, and Stoke. They're both sitting in the relegation zone. So both of those clubs are big clubs, particularly Huddersfield, who was it Huddersfield that was in like the top 6 earners in the world last season? Do I remember that correct, or spenders or something?
I'm not too sure, but they were in the Premier League, and that's one thing for certain. And
yeah,
they got them.
And they were in the Premier League in a time when the TV deal gave every club just way too much money for their own good. So to see them have such a poor start, 5 losses and 1 draw, is sort of an indictment on the club as a whole. So I'll look on with interest for Huddersfield. Hopefully they stay bad, because as a Leeds man, they're our rival, and I'd love to see us smash them, like we did Stoke. But yeah, it should be an intriguing season. I personally think the top 6 is almost set. I think Swansea, Leeds, West Brom and Fulham will be the big four for this season, and the last two will be whoever sort of puts it together at the end.
Yeah, I can't really argue with that, to be honest.
Well, I think that for reals this time wraps up European football. Thanks for coming on the show and giving us your expertise on everything that happened.
Pleasure as always.
We'll catch you next week. Have a good one.
Have a good one, mate. See you soon.
Well, Mitch, that about wraps up the episode of the World of Sport podcast, and I really can't wait for next week because we'll know who won the US Open. Finals footy in the AFL will have started. The NFL will have started. F1 will continue. The all-important fourth test of the Ashes series will potentially be done by the next episode. And look, I can't wait. And to all the listeners, thanks for listening to this episode, and we'll catch you next week.